It's a very symbolic moment for me to be here, as far as I was as a junior diplomat here at the course for junior diplomats from the Eastern Partnership countries in 2008. And it's really a very interesting and wonderful feeling to touch, the history here and to also reflect a little bit to where we are under really harsh circumstances of war. And I'm very happy to join this discussion, and I really think and I want you to be open with your questions, and I don't want to have it as a long monologue, but I will also allow myself to probably come up with some of my personal stories, which I believe is the best way how to depict and to give you a sense how the war looks like, because it's something that we don't usually, the peaceful time, don't usually appreciate, and this is something that you can lose in a second, just like we did in 2014, and then with this 24th of February full-fledged invasion. I'm also happy to be here with Robert, because he is a very special person in my life. We got in touch under circumstances of occupation in Crimea when he was a special envoy of the Secretary General in Crimea with the task to report the Secretary General about the developments in Crimea. And I was a journalist working with the British group of journalists traveling Crimea back and forth. And when he was actually blocked by the self-defense guys, those actually FSB behind so-called local people, I was the first one to come and, as he says, save him, because for him the presence of the international journalistic team was a kind of a savior and immunity to what could happen to him. And then we had this whole story, of interaction, and I'm very happy that together with him I'm here today to speak to you. Let me start probably with the first day of war, how it happened. My minister was out of the office. He was coming back from New York, as far as we have many diplomats here. Let me probably, give you the sense how Ukrainian diplomats met the war. And I came to the ministry 9 o'clock in the morning. I was staying in my friend's house close to Kyiv, and 4 o'clock, almost 5 o'clock in the morning, I saw the first explosions out of the window, and we knew that the war started. We actually prepared ourselves to the war, having all of the necessary instructions, 3 types of reactions, depending on what kind of scenario will be revealed by Russia. But then 9 o'clock in the morning, I already came to the ministry. I had to take the leadership, so I managed to bring together all of the directors of the departments, and we had 2 hours of planning, where to run, what to do, how to communicate, what kind of instructions to elaborate. And then as a suggestion, I said to my colleagues saying, okay, let us go and check the bomb shelter. The premises of MFA, which is a beautiful building, was constructed during the Soviets, and when we went downstairs, which is a deep bomb shelter, we kind of revealed this irony of the moment, because we were supposed to hide from US bombs during the Soviets, and we were hiding from the Russian bombs. And our diplomats were still not able to grasp the harsh reality, the war. We've been joking, kind of, okay, let us have a party here, bringing some champagne, kind of trying to energize ourselves, or kind of to at least have this hope. And after checking this bomb shelter, we went upstairs, and my office is on the 6th floor, which is the highest floor, with this perfect view to the whole city of Kyiv. And before going to my office, I said to my colleagues, look, the infrastructure is not ready yet. So if you don't hear the siren, but if you hear any kind of explosion or any sound that you might think is dangerous, just go immediately downstairs to the bomb shelter. And in 15 minutes after this check, I was standing looking out of the window with my coffee in my hands, and I saw the first airstrike. At the other bank of the river, Dnipro River, the airstrike came, and the Russians hit the intelligence service premises. And I was kind of stunned. It took me seconds, to understand what happened, and I immediately took my staffers from the office, and we went downstairs. And in this very moment, diplomats were silent. No one had any joke. No one offered to have some champagne, or to have this bombshell party or so. So we spent hours there, and there was a decision to evacuate part of the government to the western part of the country. The other remained in Kyiv. I had, as far as I had to take the leadership, so I had to coordinate. We started to destroy secret materials and documents, because we had information that Russians might attack the administrative buildings, including the MFA, and might enter the Kyiv city. I missed the evacuation train, and then it took me 2 days to go by car to the western part of my country, and we had a separate headquarters, and it was really a hell. And the first probably time when I allowed myself to feel any kind of emotion, because we were robots, you know, working 24/7, was in almost 2 weeks after, when some of my friends managed to bring me a suitcase with my personal belongings, because I left the city with my handbag, with no clothes. And I've been wearing same thing for almost 2 weeks because of the martial law. All of the shops were closed. You couldn't buy even the socks in the shops. And then in my apartment, I had some friends who joined the territorial defense units, and I had 10 men living in my apartment. And a man whom I never knew, he helped me via the WhatsApp to collect things to the suitcase. And when they brought me the suitcase, when I touched my belongings, I really burst into tears. And this was the first moment when probably I, as a person, understood the very hardship of the war. And you know, these first days of war, kind of when we were falling asleep, we didn't know if we would be able to be awakened. And the first thing that I did for probably weeks was going into the WhatsApp and checking if my beloved ones are okay, if they were online, you know, just texting, how are you, you know, those especially friends who joined the armed forces. So it was really a hell, and this war is a serious tragedy for millions of my compatriots. But what I have to say is that the government performed super efficient, because we didn't have a pause even for a day. We managed to gather twice a day. And COVID actually prepared us, because we got used to work remotely, distantly. So we had gatherings of the government twice a day, adopting all of the necessary decisions, you know. So we, I believe, performed the super management under these challenging circumstances. And the other story that actually I want to reflect is, you know, how I understood how the war looks like. I've been at the western part in 2 weeks after. I was going to the headquarters, and I saw a group of girls, teenagers, like 13, 14-year-old girls, and I've been passing by and just listening to what they were discussing. They were not discussing fashion or love affairs. They've been discussing biological and chemical weapons in a very expert way, I would say. I was really stunned, because this is the way how my country is now going through. I'm here today as a special envoy of the President of Ukraine to advocate for EU candidacy. We still have some skeptical countries, some skeptical voices, thinking that there is a crisis of EU and the crisis of enlargement, suggesting us first decide what will be the future of EU and then granting any status for my country. We hear skeptical voices speaking about corruption and reforms in Ukraine, which is also, let's say, a part of the reality, and we've been doing our best since especially 2014 after the Revolution of Dignity, you know, to perform another way of life, because every single dimension of our life, be it education, healthcare, governance, whatever, is under reform and is in line with the association agreement that we signed up to many years ago, and within NATO standards when it comes to the military and army. So I believe, which is also important to understand, that my compatriots and Ukrainians, 91% of Ukrainians, they are willing to join EU, and these numbers are unprecedented. And we have a very strong feeling that we are fighting for not only the existential issue of survival, not only for the territorial integrity, but also for the European future and Europeans, because we contain this tyranny. And I will also reflect about Crimea, as far as I was a journalist there. I worked at the peninsula, and I have a very strong feeling that the war that we have today is a direct consequence of impunity, is a direct consequence of our inability to give proper response to Putin and his aggression in 2014. When I say our, I mean not only Ukraine, but also international community as such. Because when Putin attacked Crimea, you know, we still had appeasement rhetorics. It's just like 1938, before the Second World War, when Munich Peace Accords have been signed, when United Kingdom and France have been appeasing Hitler, thinking that Sudetenland and Austria would be enough for Hitler, but it only gave a year. So Donbass in Crimea is absolutely the same that Sudetenland and Austria is for Hitler. And I believe that we all allowed Putin to consider this let's say, negotiations, Minsk, Normandy, whatever process is behind as a weakness. And he allowed himself to do further steps. And my message today, not only to you, but also to all of international partners whom I met and meet, is that it's a very wrong perception to think that by sitting aside, by just silently watching what has been happening in Ukraine, or trying to negotiate Putin, especially on the coast of Ukraine, is a fully false perception. And it will bring us to a larger war, because it will only give some time to Putin to prepare for other aggressions. We have Poland, we have Baltic states, we have Georgia and Moldova, and I believe that these countries, they understand perfectly well the potential risks for their future. And when it comes to the, let's say, formula, what more could be done, it's very simple, I think. So sanctions that we managed to perform, it's not enough, especially when it comes to the energy. Russia has been earning huge amounts of money every day. Europe has been paying 60 million of euros for energy every day. Russia earned 63 billion of euros for fossil fuels since the beginning of the war. They will earn more than 220 billion of euros for the energy by the end of the 2022. And these are the numbers that doesn't allow us to know and to understand that their economy is weakened, because they are still capable to hit the cities, to kill people in my country. Then deputinization, which is about political pressure, which is about constantly kind of showing that the way how Russia has been communicating to the neighbors or to the world is not the right way, and that, you know, it should not be an impunity thing. So accountability is another thing. And also the EU candidacy, which I believe is a way how to support our spirits, because the war, it's not only about the physical conventional war. It is, of course, when the armed forces have been fighting in the battlefield, but it's also about the energy behind. And I believe that no one expected, neither do we, that we would be that resistant fighting with the second largest army in the world for more than 110 days. So I believe that this EU candidacy, as far we have a strong feeling that we've been fighting for European future, and at least in finally been recognized as a European country, because everything started in 2014 with this President Yanukovych, who wanted to reconsider the EU integration, and then when people said no, they crushed the streets and the revolution of dignity started, and Putin kind of used this momentum and invaded my country. So this gives us a flavor that it's 8 years of war for our European future, for us to be recognized as a European country. So for us it's crucial. We understand that, let's say, this candidate status is a very symbolic gesture. It's an investment into the future. We are fully aware that between this candidate status and membership, it's a journey. And we don't need a kind of, back door to enter the EU. We understand that we will go through the processes, through the reforms, and a lot will be dependent, the outcome of the war. But what we say is that it's kind of a join the Olympic reserve team. So when you join the Olympic reserve team, you start training to perform if you are ready at the Olympic Games. So this is how we perceive it, and we, of course, also rely on your support. Technically, 17th of June, this Friday, the European Commission will come up with an opinion. The President of the EU Council, Ursula von der Leyen, she visited Kiev just recently. We believe that it might be a positive communication, positive opinion that will be performed. And then the national parliaments of the member states would have a national debate and also suggest to the governments to support this opinion or not support. And I hope that the Dutch Parliament will also stick to this opinion and will also consider this possibility for my country. And then to conclude, probably about the war. As far as Russians failed to perform and to accomplish their goals, they really meant to have a blitzkrieg in taking control over Ukraine in 3 days. And I remember how my colleague, another deputy minister who was in this negotiation team, he shared this piece of information. He said that the Russian delegation at the first day of war came, they put the maps on the table, and they just, in a very bold manner, said, "We're going to kill you." They even pointed the locations when and where they wanted to kill us, and they failed. Obviously, they couldn't accomplish their goals, so they used this negotiation that we started in Belarus and then, transferred to Turkey, Antalya, and as a time to regroup. They are now focusing on the east and on the south. They have occupied approximately 20% of territories, and before, in 2014, it was 7. It's like Limburg and Brembert, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's tame. It's 20% of the territory.
Yeah.
And the Kherson region, which is the bordering region with Crimea, is the full scope of occupation. When they appoint new administration, when they blackmail people, if they refuse to collaborate, they kill them. They blackmail farmers if they don't, if they refuse to sow the soil, they kind of nationalize the land or they take the property away. The mobile connection is already the Russian connection, the GEM, the Ukrainian broadcasting, so the whole bunch of consequences of occupation are there, including this brainwash and propaganda saying that Ukraine doesn't care about you, that Ukraine will not be able to take this territory back, that the Russian reality is the new reality, just stick to this and get used to this Russian paradise. So, of course, the battlefield is the most important negotiation field. We understand that technologically we have to be upgraded, because otherwise we will not be able to win. Because if we fight same technologies, same level, Russia will always have an advantage. And I believe that this shift of perception that appeared to be in Ramstein when the defense ministers and general staffers met to consider how we can commonly and jointly win, not just survive, but win. It's about providing Ukraine different category of technologies. Because if it's same level, they will always have an advantage in terms of the physical, weight within the soldiers and the weaponries that they use. So another issue that we always request from partners, including the Netherlands, and I'm very thankful that Netherlands provided with the heavy weapons that we need, is the artillery systems, multi-launch rocket systems, something that is about making our army more efficient. And to conclude, my president says that extraordinary times, they need extraordinary decisions. We are now living in a moment that Europe has been changing right in front of our noses. It's just, we have to feel it. And a lot depends on us, on our decisions. And we really believe that this momentum should be used as a lesson learned, because we have 2008 with Georgia bombardments of Sin Valley. We had 2014 with Crimea and Donbass. Now we have the full-fledged war, and if you think that it's not about you, it's a huge mistake. It's only 2 countries that makes a distance between you and the war. It's like to go to Spain. Thank you.
I mean, it is special for me to sit here together with you, because you were indeed, as you have mentioned already, my saving angel when I was in trouble in Crimea. But let's dwell on that another time. You have come for a much more important occasion, which is to convince us also here in the Netherlands that the time has come for the European Union to give Ukraine EU candidacy status. And I feel also that you're not coming on behalf of the government alone. You're coming on behalf of a people in Ukraine, which the big majority which has been yearning for this already for so long. It is about Ukraine, giving Ukraine an anchor in Europe. For too long there has been uncertainty about where Ukraine belongs. I have always felt that. I certainly felt it also in my own country before the war, I tell you. There was even some indifference maybe about this country, what this country precisely was about. I think you have been showing by the resistance. The Ukrainians have been now already for more than 100 days. You have been the subject of an unprovoked attack from Russia. You have been showing to us what it is to be free, and what it is to be about freedom, about values. This is about values. Some of you in the audience may know that I also have a Ukrainian family. I'm married with somebody there. And so we have been also in contact with them. And I can tell you, this is what Ukrainians have been yearning so much for. In the words of my mother-in-law, to be become like us, like Dutch people. Maybe even to be bored like Dutch people. You know, this is also something what freedom is about. It is, but this is not what this country has been able to get so far. Now, let me also shortly then say why I think that your perspective, the Ukrainians' perspective, what you have been saying about why this is now so important, why I think that by and large that should be also our perspective, the European perspective, the Dutch perspective. I feel that indeed this is a moment in history also for Europe of to do or not to do. We can again decide to postpone candidacy status, continue the discussion. I sometimes hear about a roadmap to candidacy status. I don't think this is the time to do so. You would give a very negative signal to the Ukrainians and a very positive one to Putin. Let me also tell you that I personally believe that an end to the war will come closer if actually our leaders next week take the right decision. Because it would be a signal, the strongest possible signal to Putin that we do not accept what he has been doing. And should we still have any illusions about Putin after he has been likening himself to Peter the Great? And what he has been saying about Ukraine, that Ukraine is not a country? So we have to stand up now. And I feel also that if Europe is also interested in reconstruction and in actually helping Ukraine also after this terrible war will end, and every war will end at some point, then again I ask you, are we then going to invest in a political vacuum? No, we shouldn't. We should make it very clear that Ukraine belongs to Europe, provided, of course, and it was important what you have been saying, Emine, that there is still a path to go for you in terms of transparency, the fight against corruption, the rule of law. That will take time. But again, I believe it will be easier for you to cope with all these things as part of a clear path to a European membership than actually being where you are now. Let's end this confusion about where Ukraine belongs.
Well, first, let me start saying that EU is a collaboration of countries that really cherish the values. I believe that we are fighting for those values as not a single European country did. I mean, we are fighting for freedom, we are dying for freedom, and we believe this is something that should be taken as a way of dignity. European Union is a collaboration of countries that should project the stability, and I believe that the very notion of stability has been questioned by Russia since 2014. And if we still have illusion of having stability in EU when we have the war in the middle of Europe in the 21st century, this is the question that also Ukraine can contribute to as a country that has this experience in a military way. We can contribute as an agriculture country, we can contribute as a digital country, because something that we did when it comes to this digitalization track is unprecedented. Something that we do with this resistance, military resistance, is unprecedented. I believe that we can be a contributor, not only as a country that expects help or assistance, right, but also can contribute. This is the first notion. The second, how it might be taken if not the candidate status. Well, the language of metaphor here, when a man, let's say, expresses his love to a woman, he wants to marry her, or kind of saying that I want to be with you and I love you, he gives the ring, the wedding ring. So for us, this candidate status is about giving the ring. It doesn't mean that we're gonna marry, or it will take some time. It's still some questions there, but we need this ring. And if we don't take it, of course, it's a kind of a frustration there behind. So as far as I said, that 91% of population, they are pro-EU membership. They are waiting for this as a signal, and we understand that it's a gesture. It doesn't mean that the day after tomorrow you will start negotiations on EU entrance. It doesn't mean that those crisis issues will kind of disappear. Of course it will be there, and I think that it doesn't exclude the path that we will have to go through in order to prepare ourselves when it comes to the technical issues. And then the other thing that should be taken into consideration, our successful implementation of association agreement, which is 63%. It's hundreds of pages of reports that we've been annually sending to Brussels as the results and our achievements. And this is not about the politics, it's beyond. We have a special vice prime minister on European and Euro-Atlantic integration. Every single ministry has a special deputy on European and Euro-Atlantic integration. So it's really a strong institutional investment of my country into this result. And having this candidate status is only the beginning of a journey. So of course, if it's not granted, it will be taken as a message to Putin. As Robert rightly said, there are two interpretations or signals that might be given, either to Ukraine as a strong signal of support that you are not the gray zone or the buffer zone, you are the country that has a dignity to fight for values that we all share, or signal to Putin that he is right and allowed to do what he wants to do. Because the Russian narrative will start sucking this right immediately after this decision will not, if it's not taken, as the victory of Russian diplomacy, saying, oh, this is, the not capable Europe, Europe is divided, is not unanimous, nothing is there, and these kind of narratives that are traditional for Russian propaganda. With Crimea, I believe that the most important that you should know is this historical context, because the main narrative that it's been fully sold here to the European audiences is that Crimea is a traditional land of Russia and that Putin has a claim to Crimea. But what actually happens is that Crimean Tatars, by the very fact of their physical presence, they destroy this myth, because us being an indigenous people who were born as a nation out of the mixture of tribes and populations ever inhabited Crimea, and if you put 10 Crimean Tatars in line, they will be drastically different. You can see Asian faces, you can see European faces, you can see dark skin, white skin, blue eyes, dark eyes. So it's kind of, the whole, let's say, mixture and cocktail of nations is being reflected in what we call indigenous populations, who are Karais, Krimchaks, and Crimean Tatars. And this is exactly why Russian Empire, since the very first day of presence in Crimea, has been doing its best to eliminate Crimean Tatars, because we have always been a kind of a bone in their throat. Because when we are there, Russia cannot claim that Crimea is a traditional land of Russia. The 1783 annexation of Catherine II. It was this wonderful story when I was 7 years old, and I had this first exhibition tour to the Han's Palace, which is probably the only remnant of the Crimean Khanate period. And I was 7 years old, and it was my first visit there, and we had almost 2 hours of guided tour, which is a classic Russian-speaking guide. And then when we left the palace, the first question that I asked my father as a child, I said, "Daddy, when are we going to hear about Crimean Tatars?" So the whole story in the very heart of the Crimean Tatar culture was about Russia, Catherine II, her army, and the glory of Russian Empire, who brought, Pushkin's fountain, who brought civilization to barbaric Crimea. And what they did, they fully falsificated the whole history, because, for example, I belong to aristocratic Crimean Tatar family, and the western part of Crimea belonged to my family, but not a single document is there. It's only, just as a family story that has been traveling from generation to generation, because when they annexed Crimea, they started to eliminate archives. As the result of this annexation, 1/3 of Crimean Tatar population left to Ottoman Empire, today's current Bulgaria, Romania, and Turkey. This is exactly why we have a huge diaspora. There are more than 2 million of ethnic Crimean Tatars. And then the second pillar of this elimination was 1944 deportation, when, by the way, deportation happened in half a year before the Yalta Peace Conference, when Churchill and Roosevelt came to Crimea, and they kind of pretended that nothing happened, because every single Crimean Tatar in 18th of May was put in the cattle shed wagon. These were seniors, children, and women, because men were fighting within the Red Army. And they were taken to mostly Central Asian countries, and as a result, every second Crimean Tatar died. So half of the nation died. And we were kind of put under the risk of physical existence. And my grandmothers, they survived this deportation. Every single family has this story of this tragedy. And then the change of demography started immediately after the deportation, when they kind of extracted Crimean Tatars. They brought Russians to the peninsula, and today they claim that the people of Crimea, they call them Krimchani, that the people of Crimea, they have the kind of the moral right to vote at the so-called referendum and so on. And of course 2014 automatically brought all of the Crimean Tatars to this feeling that Russia again is there, and you know, this destroy and genocide may again happen in Crimea, which is partially the true, because the first things that, I mean, if you see the political prisoners, the majority of them are Crimean Tatars. They use alleged, let's say, and kind of false narratives to claim that Crimean Tatars are Muslim extremists, for example, but we never had any case of terrorist attack in Crimea before 2014. We never had any massacres when thousands of Crimean Tatars returned to this homeland. It was very tense, I would say, this process of repatriation, because when we returned to our homeland, our houses were inhabited by other people, and we never raised an issue, okay, that let us squeeze out these people. What we were wanting and willing to have to land, so it was a land squad issue. So it was really a very difficult process of return, and Ukraine was alone because Russia ignored it. Russia didn't pay a penny for this issue that they are responsible for as a predecessor country. So these three historical pillars is important to understand, because it actually depicts the very core of Russian policy and colonization policy. The one in 18th century, the one in 20th century, and the one in 21st century. Of course, what they have been doing is a deliberate policy of conscripting into the Russian army of Ukrainian citizens. An official attitude to those 2.5 million of Ukrainian citizens is that we claim that these are our citizens, even though the occupation is there and they have been living for 8 years under occupation. But for us, these are Ukrainian citizens. What they have been doing, they have been conscripting the Ukrainian citizens, including Crimean Tatars, into the Russian army and sending them to fight against Ukrainians at this horrible war. We don't know the numbers of how many of Crimean population within the Russian army today, but I believe it's something that they do on purpose. I mean, for the cause that we all understand, you know, to thwart, to kind of have this conflict line between the citizens and so on. But the thing is that if you refuse to be conscripted, you can be put behind bars, and we have huge amount of cases when people were put in the prison for their refusal to fight within the Russian army.
Hi, I'm Arnoud Brouwers with the Volkskrant newspaper. Thank you for your wonderful introduction, and also your personal story of how the war started. I think it's really something we lack in the Netherlands, also in our media, to be sort of there where things happen. My question is about the current situation in the war. And aside from the debate about the EU, there is simply the very serious situation in Donbass. And there is a sort of a change in mood, I think, also in Kiev, if I understand correctly, where first Ukrainian officials were thankful and satisfied with Western military aid, but the past week we've been hearing a series of increasingly dire statements from Ukrainian officials. Tomorrow, of course, there is this meeting again in Brussels about Western weapon support, but as you know, there are also sort of limitations, especially in Western Europe. There are political but also military limitations. So my question is, was there sort of too much optimism 2 or 3 or 4 weeks ago about the sort of the development of the war, or was this sort of calculated? And do you think that when sort of the delivery is sped up, that actually there is a good fighting chance? I think besides the EU, this is really the most serious question of the moment.
Well, thank you for this question. I believe it's really the most important question to be raised. Ukrainian leadership, I believe, is as frank as it can be in their assessment of situation, in their requests to the international partners, and in their expectations. And the consequence of this expectation is actually our will to win. Not only to have this long scenario of endless war, when we kind of die, every day, and it's a constant kind of long way of war, but we want to win. And I believe that we proved that we may win in case if we backed up. We really have a strong feeling that it's about common responsibility, because let us just imagine ourselves that Ukraine has been swallowed by Putin. Let us imagine ourselves this worst scenario that might be there, because no one knows the outcome. We don't know how long we could be resistant. So the question, what would happen if Ukraine and if the war in Ukraine is not contained? We are very frank saying so, that the larger scale of war would start. It would be only the matter of time. So what we are requesting for is not to wait, is not to think a lot and too long, is kind of help us to win, as far as we proved to kind of to be ready to pay the highest price possible, which is the price of our people. And for European countries, it's only the matter of money. Okay, it's like 50 cents plus to the petrol, to the gasoline, but not your lives. And we really think that this is crucial for your understanding, because if Russia is successful in Ukraine, Russia would attack other countries. And for us, it's very evident and it's very clear. And what we are trying to message is this feeling that insecurity is there, that Europe as such is in the, let's say, most serious danger after the Second World War, when Putin wants to reconsider not only the Ukrainian future, but he wants to reconsider the whole architecture of international relations and security that we all signed up to after the Second World War. His messages, his articles, his speeches when he says that NATO enlargement should be reconsidered up till 1997, it means that he declares that insecurity is there and that he would not stop with Ukraine. So what we really want is that the international community understands it and then backs us up with the minimum that you can do, which is the less that you can lose, not the lives of your people, but the budgets, but the weapons. And of course, it is frustrating to have discussions of politicians in prosperous European countries and capitals kind of considering, debating about whether to help or not to help, whether to give and provide weapons or not to provide, because for us it's a narrow thinking.
But it is, of course, problematic if it means that really the West, and in particular within Europe, we have different views now on how this war should end. I feel that we should all be uniting behind a policy that when it ever comes to negotiations, that Ukraine has the best chance actually to negotiate an honorable peace. Because at the moment, I would say, that is not yet there. Just imagine if we would now listen to those who say, let's stop this war immediately, let's start to talk with Putin, while he has been occupying already, what is it?
20%.
20% of your country.
Yeah.
What that means, also in terms of international law. Are we then going to accept that 1/5 of the country will remain in Russian hands? That is why it is so important that we continue to help Ukraine to resist and hopefully also to recover territory. It is for Ukraine to decide when you want to seriously negotiate also. After all, you are the ones suffering. We are supplying with weapons. It means also for the Dutch people that indeed the gas prices are higher now at the pump, and that needs to be explained by the government why this is so. But my short answer to your question is, no, this is not yet the time for negotiations, which does not mean that you should not talk and that you should actually prepare for the day. Again, I've said it already in my first introduction. I feel that giving Ukraine now candidacy status could help in future negotiations, because if Ukraine would decide to forgo NATO membership, to accept some neutrality, as the President has been indicating in the beginning of the war, it would be much easier for Ukraine to do so than in a situation where there is no anchor for Ukraine anywhere in Europe. Yeah. So again, I bring it back to the subject matter of today. That is why I see this is a moment for Europe also to do or not to do. And it is related to your question about negotiations.
So concerning the issue of Crimea, many Western pollsters, including German GfK, DC-based Pew Research, have conducted public opinion surveys in Crimea and found that a vast majority of people there do actually support being part of the Russian Federation. So this is not Russian propaganda, these are Western pollsters. So that means that reintegrating Crimea into Ukraine would pose a contradiction to to international law in the sense of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. I wonder, how do you reconcile this contradiction?
That as it is reflects absence of understanding of the context of occupation and how the life is taking place under occupation. It's the same that if I come to you with my gun in the pocket and I ask you, I mean, do you want to walk with me? And then you're kind of blackmailing you with this gun. What would you say? Would you say that you don't want to walk with me, let's say, or to do something what I need you to do? It's absolutely the same, because the main feeling under the occupation is fear. If you dare to say that Crimea is Ukraine, you can be put behind bars. If you dare to even post a Facebook material or any article where it's been indicated that Crimea is Ukraine, you can be put behind bars, 5 years in the prison. And this has been, let's say, kind of implementing this policy, and a police state attitude towards people is been implementing in Crimea for 8 years. My friends and relatives, if they come to me to visit me, I mean, before 24th of February, of course, what I've mentioned, and it's a really interesting thing, when we started discussing anything about Ukraine, Russia, even it's very far from politics, you know what they do? They start whispering. They don't speak loud, because the level of self-censorship is that high, because people are very much scared. So any surveys, any polls, any numbers that might be the result of, you know, the questionings and so on, are not reliable numbers, I believe. And it's the same with the referendum. I remember the day of the so-called referendum, which is 16th of March, when we had these pictures of, you know, exaltated population with Russian flags. Yes, we did have amount of people pro-Russians. I mean, even not pro-Russian, but those nostalgic towards Soviet Union, because now these Russians, when they revealed the true face of Russia, when they would not be able to criticize the government, when there is no freedom, when there is no liberty, you know, it's something that is of a great value, and Crimean population was always sharing it. So of course it's something that gives a different feeling of the life. So this day of the so-called referendum, Russia forcibly made people attending the so-called referendum. Forcibly. Those doctors employed in the hospitals or teachers employed in the schools, because otherwise, if they refused to attend the referendum, they would have consequences. And this is the occupation reality. So let us understand that it's a kind of a dark room, and you bring the candle, so you can see only the part of the dark room, but you will never be able to see the whole room and the spectrum and the scope of problems. This is what occupation means. But it's even not about referendum. Look, whenever the Russian army is there, we cannot have any referendum, because it's beyond international law. I remember this press conference of President Putin when he was asked if this was a Russian army in Crimea. He said no. He said, oh, you can buy the military uniform in any shop, just go and buy. So he lied to all of us, and we lied to ourselves, thinking that, you know, making deal with Putin is something that may help us to escape from other aggression, but it's not. He was asked if he would attack Ukraine. He said no. They always denied these rumors about the attack on Ukraine. I believe that we cannot trust Russia.
Yeah, hello. My name is Mark Duursma from newspaper NRC. I think the arguments from the countries that are skeptical about the candidacy status can be summarized in two words, which is corruption and Balkans. And my question is about the second word. Because also our PM, the Dutch PM says it wouldn't be fair to grant the status because of the long waiting time for the 6 countries in the Western Balkans. So what is your response to that argument?
We believe that this candidate status doesn't mean that it might stop the further enlargement, including the Western Balkan countries. It might only invigorate, it might only boost some of the processes and understandings and, let's say, perceptions and ideas that are there in the corridors of Brussels, European institutions, including the capitals of skeptical countries. We believe that it's a kind of, you know, so it's like a running passages. We have sportsmen, and every sportsman has its way, right? So let us judge upon the results, upon the criteria and technical results. So we believe that we should, I mean, kind of, our candidacy status does not impact at all the other countries. And we are against package consideration. We've been also frank saying so. We think that when it comes to the EU, it's about and the membership. It's about readiness for this membership, mostly of bureaucratic nature, of technical nature, of these criteria and numbers that show that any country has been ready. But candidate status is a different thing. It's a political decision. It's a message. It's a signal. And we all understand that granting this status, it doesn't mean only after the granting of the status, then you should apply criteria, conditions, preconditionalities, prerequisites, and whatever is there. Because granting it, it means that you are only allowed to be in the corridor, or you are kind of recognized as the country that might start, you know, preparing for the EU membership. So it doesn't, we believe, we think, and we feel it that way, that it doesn't mean that you kind of step on the interests of other countries, including, by the way, Georgia and Moldova. We think that it's about kind of state-by-state consideration, result-by-result consideration, and it's about journey.
Well, I will be very short. Just also to echo what you just said. For me, it's a bit like looking for an argument, an excuse, not to give Ukraine the candidacy status, while this country is at war, while the existence of this country is at stake. And I might add maybe also those of Georgia and Moldova to follow if we take the wrong decisions now in Europe concerning this war in Ukraine. So this is, again, for me, I just want to repeat what I have said before. I'm very happy that you are here, Emine, because you can say these things much better than we can. You come from a country at war. You were a danger yourself in the beginning. Let's not forget that too. There were death lists already made for the so-called fascist clique, and you were one of them. So let's realize all this, that this is a moment for Europe to stand up, to actually think strategically, not like an accountant, and take a good decision.
I thought that the worst year in my life was 2014, 2015, but I was wrong. Because after abandoning Crimea, after leaving my country in 2 cars, my daughter, my husband, my cat, and 2 cars full of stuff and books, I thought, and going into unknown, I mean, into nowhere actually, I thought that this would be the biggest challenge in my life, but I was wrong, because what we survived through and keep on surviving since 24th of February is still this feeling that you don't know what's going to be a future like. You cannot be backed up by any kind of ground. It's like, you know, being in nowhere. It's kind of not planning anything. It's just doing what you can do to survive. My personal formula is about, for my country, is about survival, revival and arrival. I believe that for us, number one issue is to survive, then to revive and reconstruct and rebuild our country, and I really believe that we have a capacity to do so. And then to arrive actually to the country that we've been dreaming of. When my country is a member of EU, when my country is transparent, when my country is digital, when my country is full of prosperity and wonderful people, I believe that we have really talented people in Ukraine. So this is the formula that I invest my efforts to. And to finalize, Bob, you asked me what kind of feelings do I have being here in the Netherlands. Well, usually we all tend to find our embassies by the flags. So whenever we see our flag at the premises, it means that this is your embassy. But I think that the Netherlands is such as a country, is an embassy of Ukraine, because there are so many Ukrainian flags on the buildings, on the windows of people. And I'm very thankful to those people for tremendous support that we have, because I believe that friends in need are friends indeed. And this is something that we do appreciate. So I will take these reflections back to Ukraine, and I will also try to communicate this thing to Ukrainian people.
Thank you very much, Emine.